The views and opinions expressed in these historical letters that may contain vernacular used in the World War II era, the post-war era, and the Cold War era do not reflect the views and opinions of any of the individuals involved with this project, including, but not limited to, the podcast's creators. This is the Love Sweetie podcast, episode 1. This is our inaugural episode. It's been a long time coming that we've been planning starting up this podcast. Both myself, I'm Allison, and this is Jamie.
Hello.
We're going to introduce ourselves here just because this is really the first episode. We're not going to do this every episode, but we think it's important that you just know a little bit about us and our relationship before we dive into the content here. We do hope that you listen to episode 0, explaining the purpose behind the podcast. That episode, You, Me, and the Gatepost, goes into a lot of details. And this episode, we want to jump into the letters of Sweetie. And in case you missed it, we will go into briefly who Sweetie is. But just to start, my name's Allison. I'm 40 years old. Just turned 40 a little while ago. And as I reflect back on my life and had moved recently, I came across a number of letters of my grandmother, which is really where this podcast is coming from. But I'm a historian. I studied history in college. I have a graduate degree in a related field to history, and I've always been interested in telling the family stories and telling genealogy and finding that great story. And I happened to find that story in my attic, which is really funny. And I met Jamie here when we were at Williamsport, which is, I think, the home of, Jamie, if I'm right here, I think it's the home of Little League Baseball. So it's known for that. So shout out Williamsport. We met there. It's out in Lycoming County here in Pennsylvania. And immediately, I think there was just immediate respect. We didn't really talk too much at Williamsport, but then we got to meet somewhere else. Maybe you can tell us about, tell the audience about where we met, because it wasn't in Pennsylvania, ironically. It was pretty far away.
Yes, we actually, so I'm Jamie, and Allison approached me about doing this podcast, and my response was immediate. I was like, absolutely. So we had met at Williamsport, and I think we do have to touch on the fact that we are both libertarians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and this is how we met. But I think maybe too, we should mention that this isn't a libertarian podcast, but we definitely will have a libertarian feel, libertarian
Freedom.
flair. That's right. But so we met in Williamsport, and both of us attended our national convention in Reno, Nevada, which, oh my goodness. And we just hit it off. Allison was, she was lively and engaging, and she was definitely somebody who was more involved with the party, and I really appreciated that, and we just clicked. So when she came through and visited me in Westmoreland County and asked me to be on this podcast, I just jumped on the opportunity, because I knew this was going to be, when she explained to me what we were going to be doing, I knew it was going to be an amazing podcast. So I'm very honored, actually, that you asked me. And I don't think I've ever expressed that to you, but I'm honored that I was like, there's so many people I know that you know so many people, and you're incredibly outgoing and stuff, and to ask me to do this with you it's an honor. So, and I'm very much looking forward to this.
I'm so excited to be working with you on this, Jamie. And one of the big things is, I was looking for who is going to be the person. I'm an Aquarius, and I like to say, thank God I have a Virgo ascendant, so the astrology nerds will really appreciate this. I need someone to kind of balance out my energy. And I hang out with a lot of different friends. We all have different friends in life, and we all know everybody's personality is different. And when I was thinking about the practicality of Sweetie, and we'll get into that in a moment, and what everybody's going to experience when they hear these letters, I really felt like her story kind of meshed so much with your sensibilities, just from what you could tell. When you're talking with a person, you can kind of tell how they are, how they act, and the fact that you're a mother as well, which I'm not, just to be clear to everybody in the audience. I don't have any kids, and this is very much a story in which there's going to be things talked about with parenting, and I thought it was very important to have a very strong female figure who's a mother also on the podcast. And so when I was thinking back and thinking, who do I think is going to be very, very good at this? I thought, well, I think it's Jamie Smith. And I know we haven't known each other very long. Like, there's friends I've had that we go back 20 years. I know that there are a lot of people I could have done this podcast with, but you're the one I wanted to work with. on this 100%. And it was like an instant idea. Like Jamie Smith's the person I should be doing this with 100%. Jamie was saying, we talked about this a year ago. And I think it's important to note this is about April 2023. We started talking about this. And I have to shout out my colleague at work who said the content of what we're going to cover, it should be a podcast. Because this is almost impossible to print except in 30 volumes of letters.
Oh,
the unbelievable amount. I guess we should talk about that just a little bit for people to really understand. My grandmother, who is Swedish, her name was Catherine Frances Demery Graham. She's of the Demery line, which is an old line that came into America in the 1600s and winds up all the way in the Midwest with her particular line in Iowa. She left behind somewhere between, and I can only estimate because I don't have a full count just yet, somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 letters. She wrote constantly to her sister, and her sister Jean gets the biggest shout out of all because she kept them all. She stored them all, and they managed to get back to the family. And it's the recount of a life from the 1940s to the mid-1990s very consistently. And as a historian, what a treasure trove that is. To have from, I guess we would call it the silent generation, to have from the silent generation all of the commentary from the latter half of the 20th century. And we know our generation. Our generation is blogging online, and it is putting up Facebook posts, and we're putting up Twitter, or X, I guess it is now, posts and things like that. And while there's a lot of content, it's really hard to sort through. And I think we're losing track. And I remember before he died, I'd seen David McCullough talk. And he always talks about the next historians are going to have a really hard time with our generation because we're not letter writers. We don't keep diaries anymore. There's too much liability with keeping a diary, right? You get subpoenaed and then your diary's in court for all you know.
Oh my.
All of that, right? So who keeps a diary anymore? And in this case, the letters are continuous. I don't know how many people still have all of the letters continuously for a 60-year stretch. From the perspective of an average person who's just commenting on everything going on around her. So I don't want to give too much away about the letters about Catherine. She's 18 when they start, and we're going to start with this episode. We're going to go through 3 of her letters right at the beginning in 1941. But about a year ago, anyway, Jamie and I were talking about this podcast, and the reason why I met up with her out in the western part of Pennsylvania, and I'm in the eastern part, so we don't get to see each other in person too frequently. And this is also a delight just to be able to work with Jamie, in this environment because we're not close by. I can't just, Jamie, I would love to just knock on your door.
I know.
We're doing a latte.
I know. I would love to be able to do this together, but we'll get together. I guarantee you we'll be doing this for a long time. So I told Allison when we started doing this, I was like, I really hope you like me because we're going to be together for a while.
We're going to be together for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but yes, I too wanted to touch on with Sweetie's letters that not only did she consistently write, but she is incredibly detailed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And she discusses like not only like simple tasks and things that happen with that, daily life, but she also like comments on, world events and like brings that kind of stuff in and brings in local events. And, she talks about the news. And so it's a really beautiful sample.
Oh yeah.
Of American life. It's a really beautiful sample.
I don't know. I feel she's so informed with so much less online that she has access to. Like in 1940s, I feel like she's more informed about what's going on in the world, and her command of the English language was so good. Now, some of that I have to credit that to her parents. Yes. And we are going to hear about her parents, and we're going to hear from especially one of her parents as the podcast goes on, who was a doctor. So he really believed in education for all of his children. He had 5 kids. She has 4 siblings in 1941. But her command of the English language and the fact that they could write letters, that she could write letters, where there wasn't really anything scratched out. And I do have the letters here, so we'll be able to bring them up on screen so you can see this. There's not blotches. There's not scratch outs like, ooh, but I meant to write this this other thing. And when they're typewriter letters, there's no like whiteout. You can't just click delete and fix your phrase. Every single phrase is planned. It's almost like she had an outline for the letter before she wrote the letter. And somehow and I think the audience is going to hear this, there's going to be points in letters where you can see that the phrases are not planned at all. And somehow it just works as a phrase. She had a very narrative style. But yeah, going back to when we met up in the western part of the state about a year ago. And by the way, April happens to be National Card and Letter Writing Month. So as much as I know personally, I intended to start this a lot sooner with Jamie, and Jamie's been very patient and waiting here to get this thing started. I do think it's very appropriate to start recording in National Letter Writing Month.
Yes.
And I just wonder who all's sitting down. If you're an audience member and you're sitting down, you're writing letters to someone, good for you. Future historians are going to thank you. Keep them, please, people. Please keep your letters. Put them up in an attic, no matter what. What David McCullough said, give them to a local historical society when you know you're near the end, just so it's stored so that the historians have something. He said, that's how you're going to get immortality, because no one else will have been writing any. But anyway, I could go on for a while about that. But yeah, the result of that trip, the reason I was out in the western part of the state is because I decided I needed to go to Iowa. And this is where I just have to say, Iowa is a state that, especially if you live in the East Coast or the West Coast, it's very easy for it to be a flyover state that a lot of people don't travel to. Now, I have a great relationship with my father, and my father was born out there. And I thought it was very important before going into this podcast, where a lot of the letters are from Iowa, to understand where Sweetie was from, where my grandmother was from, and to actually drive through the state and see the land and see some of the places where she was. And here I'm going to shout out a couple places in Iowa. I'd like to shout out Lacona, Iowa, first of all. That's where the family was. To this day, it's a very small population. I think it's somewhere around 400 people today. And I don't think it was much more back then. It's just a little south of Des Moines, so shout out to the people of Lacona out in Warren County. And then Ottumwa, Iowa. We had a great stay in Ottumwa, Iowa. And there's going to be a lot of stories about Ottumwa, so I'm going to leave that for future episodes when we start talking about it. But you'll hear these names, and they're going to be unfamiliar names to the vast majority of people listening to this podcast because it's Iowa. Philadelphia, where I'm near Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, we have a giant population. We're pretty well known. Maybe we're well known for things like the Eagles and our fans of the Eagles and things like that.
Yeah.
It's a different pace over here, but it's a really wonderful story. So shout out to the people of Pennsylvania. Shout out to the people of Iowa. And to everybody who writes letters in National Letter Writing Month. So, I don't know, Jamie, do we think maybe we should just get started with the first letter?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Awesome. So,
and it begins.
Yeah. So the way this is going to work is we're going to have the text of the letter up on the screen, and it's going to be narrated. And so you're going to see us reacting to this letter with you. And then we're going to pause. In some of the longer letters, we'll probably pause within the letter. In some of the shorter ones, we're going to go over 3 letters tonight. In some of the shorter ones, we're going to just play the whole letter and then talk about some interesting things that are being observed. Some things have really changed from the 1940s. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes I don't think that's so much of a good thing. I think sometimes we've lost things. Some things we've definitely progressed about. And I should give a disclaimer early on. I'm not filtering or censoring the language of the 1940s. I think it's important to see where we've come from with regards to language as well. So just to note there, people are of their time, especially as a historian. People are of their time, and they just speak differently sometimes. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes that's really not good at all. But my job is not to filter out the past for the unpleasant parts that might exist there. So if you hear anything that you're like, oh my gosh, what is this term? Remember, the first letter's from 1941, and actually I have it here. The other beautiful thing is handwriting. We're losing cursive writing. I'm going to put this up on the screen. I'm hoping people can see this. When the letters start, Sweetie, my grandmother, Catherine, she's 18 years old, and she has a beautiful, beautiful script. This one, this is a highly unusual letter because it's not on her typical paper she's going to use. It's actually pulled out of a notebook. And she's going to sign it, but I love her signature. And also, we should talk about that. This is why this is called the Love Sweetie podcast. Because almost every letter she signs it Love Sweetie. It was her nickname for the family. And everybody knew her from beginning to end. That was her name. So the name of the podcast is in honor of that. But let's go ahead and play this first episode. And we actually get to hear from Sweetie herself here when she's 18. This is January 1941. January 7th, 1941. I got your letter in which you said I owed you a letter. Apparently you either did not get a typewritten letter from me that I mailed in Lacona, or else you forgot and thought you'd already answered it. Anyway, I've been waiting not too patiently to hear from you. Check up on that letter, will you? I got a letter from Sister and have already answered it. I got a good letter from Bob, and for the first time since I've heard from him, he wrote a swell letter and told me all about the training he's getting there. He offered me some needed encouragement in leaving school and trying to get a job after I take the business courses. He told in quite detail of his hazing, formation, flying, washout, ups and downs. I really appreciated it, and I must write to him again soon. I quite agree with the doctor that I'd have turned around and beat hell out of that boy. Has he recently come in, or was he there while I was? I wonder if you couldn't have laid it on while people weren't looking. A 14-year-old boy should know better, and if he is just plain mean, he should be properly punished. I don't hold with apologizing. It doesn't take long enough, and it doesn't sink in very well. I hope he did not hurt you very badly. Weren't you more angry than hurt? I got a letter from Mom, and she told me all about Daddy's busy day. The day I left. I left at about 1:15 and went with a Morel meat salesman from Lacona to Sheraton. I wanted to catch a 2:52 train from Sheraton to Ottumwa, but because he had to stop about 4 times to take meat orders, we did not get to Sheraton until 3:20. It was okay, though, because the train took Chicago passengers only. I decided to wait and take a 4:25 bus to Ottumwa. It was more than an hour and a half late, and did not come until after 6 o'clock. While waiting on the bus, a big fat girl started talking to me, and she, along with her incessant string of questions, proved more of a nuisance than company. I got to Ottumwa, called Lucille Miller, and she came and got me. I stayed there Saturday night and went back to Fairfield when they took her Sunday afternoon. One of the girls here got to the bus with 2 big suitcases. Oh yes, she has a hat locked right on a radio, a big hat box, a cosmetic kit, and the edge of her head, a couple of big sacks. The bus driver opened the door and saw her. He rolled his eyes, moaned, and said, "Well, little lady, where's your cook stove?" She said, "Don't worry, but it's sitting right outside waiting for you to go and carry it in." She went back and found a seat, straightened her hat, settled the radio, and put the big hat box up on the rack. The driver later on came back with some suitcases, and the bus was pretty full, and the racks were needed for suitcases. He yelled, "Whose hat box is this?" Well, she didn't say anything, and so he began looking around, and when he saw her sitting there so noticeably, looking the other way, he broke out into a slow grin and said, "Oh, the lady with the cook stove. Sorry, but you'll have to hold this." And so saying, he plunked it down on her lap. It was so big she could scarcely see over it. She rode that way for quite a while, glancing out around the box to see what was going on. The bus gradually thinned out at stops along the road, and when the bus stopped again, she decided, well, there's lots of room now. I guess I'll get rid of this. And it just happened at this stop, several more people were waiting to get on. She didn't know it, though. She was standing with the hat box held up above her head, just ready to plop it in the rack, when the bus driver started down the aisle with suitcases in his hands. She saw him coming, but he saw her too and said, "I told you not to do that." She said, "I was just stretching. There can't be anything the matter with that." She was quite a clown, sat back down and held the box. When she left, the driver said, "I hate to see you walking luggage carriers get on a bus. I'm always glad to see you leave. Next time, don't forget the stovepipes." She was clever and kept the entire bus in stitches. I doubt if it sounds so amusing to you, but she sure helped pass the time a little more quickly and gave a few tired people a chance to laugh a little. I haven't been so very busy, though I do have that same term paper waiting on me when I'm flush with time, and that had better be soon, for it is due in about 2 weeks. 2 girls broke their pledge to the Empyrean sorority, and one was asked to break pledge because she had been drinking, and 2 there'd done some running around. Tonight we exchanged criticisms, little typewritten criticisms, unsigned, put into envelopes. Nobody knows what the other person's were. I know mine would be pretty bad, as I'm not held very high in the esteem of my fellow pledges, and certainly not of my actives. They were just what I'd expected, and then some. if I thought you'd be interested, I'll send them to you. Write about it. I have to write to Bob and the folks, and I have some more casual ones to do too. So now, goodbye. Love, Sweetie. Yeah. So this is our first letter that we have here from Sweetie. And I really like this letter as the first letter that we're reviewing, simply because I think it gives immediately some of her attitude right out the gate.
Oh, absolutely.
She has no problem with judging people. That's absolutely apparent, I think, to everybody. And she tells Jean the exact description down to the dialogue of what's going on. Something as simple as a bus ride. And I was looking at this on Google Maps just to tell the differences between how much time we have to spend just in travel. And that's going to come up a lot in this podcast. How much time is spent commuting from one place to another with limited modes of transportation. Now, they still had cars in the 1940s, but it's just the access to so much travel. She couldn't just call an Uber and say, I need to get, to Sheraton. And so I looked it up on the map. Lacona to Sheraton today would be about a 15-minute car ride. And Sheraton to Ottumwa, that area, would be about an hour. She's had about 4 hours to get in this stretch of time. So one thing I'm really grateful for these days is we are not spending our lives in as many like car rides as needed to be spent to get from one place to another back then. Just because of access to the transportation. If she could call an Uber, she probably would have, and I wonder what her letter would have been like.
I think that would have been interesting. I don't think the Uber would have shown up on time.
No, I don't. Maybe not. But hey, for the Uber drivers that are really good out there, if you do drive Uber and you're great, thank you.
Well, I think it's just really interesting too, and I want to point out that there's a typo, and that Allison has kept all the typos in.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that authenticity, and definitely don't want her to change that. So, let's talk a little bit about she hints on Bob. So just to give a little clarity, this is her brother.
Yeah,
and he is and where is he at?
He is training for basically he's in the beginning of the military, and I think this is going to be very apparent. We're in 1941, and we should give the context there. Just to rewind now, as a historian, I don't want to go into too many details about what's going on because it's not the focus of the podcast, but I think it's really, really important to say, as most people might know, but others might not, World War II is very much going on in Europe at the time that this is being written. But the critical thing is America has yet to enter the war. So her letter is not focused on World War II. She's focused on college and getting from one place to another. She's 18. But I think everybody can kind of predict a little bit here. She has 2 brothers. Her other brother is named Frank. We don't see him mentioned in this letter, but she's talking about the training that Bob is doing. And Bob is of the perfect age, and she's the youngest child of 5. But the whole family is within about 10 years for all 5 siblings, for all 5 kids. So they're at kind of the perfect age range to really be called up and serve for World War II.
Right.
But we should note, World War II is only going on overseas at this point. America has yet to enter the war.
And Bob he has just started training. He was not drafted. He went voluntarily into the military. Mm-hmm. So, and that was very sweet. And it's very sweet to see this sibling relationship that she has with all of her siblings. Yeah. And I mean, we've already met 2 of the 3 of her 3 siblings in this first letter. And also, I mean, I'd also like to point out too that she took and drove with the Morale meat salesman.
Yep.
So and this was something that people just did.
Right.
Like, hey, can I hitch a ride with you? And in this day and age,
no, I don't think so. Unless you really know someone. Right.
And not that it's necessary to do that kind of stuff, but I guarantee you, she felt no danger.
Right.
She was not. Yeah. She was like, yeah, this is something that we do. And so and I've always been interested too, like when I read this before, when I've always been interested too, like, was this something that typically people did. So he was like, yeah, sure. And it was not, there was no payment. Was there payment that changed hands, or?
Yeah, I would wonder. I would suspect maybe there's like a little something, like a little bus fare almost. Um, but yeah, just the whole idea of the salesman. I remember always hearing when I was young about like the milkman.
Yeah.
I never heard about a meat salesman. I had to go back and check with my parents about this. Now, my mother's side of the family, they're from central Pennsylvania where there's a lot of coal heat. So I remember hearing about the coal truck. And I
Yeah.
remember hearing about the milkman, not the meat salesman.
Not the meat salesman. I mean, I'm guaranteeing refrigeration wasn't too popular at this time.
Yeah.
So yeah, they would have to get stuff and then use it either within a couple days.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, they had the refrigeration, but definitely, it sounds actually really, really good, because I have to imagine the freshness of fresh delivered meat in a state like Iowa, which is known for agriculture. And I did look it up. The John Morrell and Sons Company was formed in Iowa, so it's historically from Ottumwa. It's not. I don't believe it is today. I believe it was bought by Smithfield. And going from that, which I am more familiar with that brand, of course. But I just have this vision of this meat salesman in this truck with like a refrigerated unit, just stopping at. She says he makes the 4 stops, stopping, and then what that company is going to be selling. So it just leads to like this picture in my mind of, I need to get to this bus, I need to get to this train. Of course, the train wouldn't have stopped in Ottumwa anyway; it was going straight to Chicago. But thinking, okay, we've got to make another stop. We've got to drop off some more meat to this next person, just like the milkman or any other services that they had.
Well, too, she had to be like, think about the ingenuity, or the you had to figure out how you were going to get to a place.
Right.
You had to say, okay, I could take this, and then I could take this train. If I can't take this train, I could take that bus. I mean, I can imagine how much time was spent having to like do that kind of stuff. I type in where I want to go.
Right.
And put it in my phone and hook it up into my car and leave.
Yeah.
This is, just the juxtaposition of these events and what happened today. It's amazing to me to like think about like where we've been. And, like spending that time on the bus, obviously she passed the time.
Yeah.
She found ways to entertain herself.
Right.
I'm sure other people brought books and stuff, but yeah, and I'm guaranteeing she probably was writing stuff down too.
100% of the time. Yeah.
So, yeah, but, okay, moving along. Oh, and then too, I just really love like the gossipy parts here. So the, exchanging criticisms in putting them into envelopes. This was something that I remember from being a kid, like reading about. Yep. We called it a slam book.
Okay. Yeah.
And I just can't imagine like, and that was done how long ago? And then, still doing that today. But now you can do it on the internet.
Yeah. Now it's, I don't know. It's that anonymity. People can be mean when they're attempting to be anonymous. And that's where she's getting to. Yeah. But she's also going to Parsons College. We should note that Parsons College was a school out in Iowa. It's not in existence today. And we can look in future letters as to some more details about Parsons College. She's going to spend some time there. But yeah, so it's just, we're going to see a lot about school life for women in 1941 at that college age. And a lot of women are going into college at this time, into the business courses. They're going to have to go into a lot of different things as soon as World War II starts, and a lot of men are being sent overseas. And we're going to talk about all of that when we get to that. But Parsons College is going to school, the sorority. Yeah. People can be really mean when they're trying to be anonymous. 100%.
But it's also, this is like typical college experience. She went there, and like some people got thrown out for being a little bit.
Yeah. Not good behavior.
I don't want to say bad words. We'll get plenty of those, but yeah, like there's so many things that are very similar, and things that, we would have gone through, or we have gone through as, when we were 18, that she is going through at college. So we do have like that connection. And I love too, at the end, she's like, I have some more letters to write.
Yeah. I have to get to it.
She's like, I got this one, and I'm going to do another one, and I'm going to do another one.
Yep. As much as the letters are now over 80 years from the present time, and it's amazing, right? To think that the time difference, that's the amazing thing about these letters. As much as there's things that have changed transportation, all the rest. We still have a ton in common.
We do.
We really do with those generations. So, well, let's get into the next letter here.
Next letter.
In time, actually to July. So we're going into the summer of 1941 here. And I'm going to get this one playing for us. Thursday, 9:30. Dear Jean, I've been up ironing since 6 o'clock. It's 9:30 now, and the storm clouds have made it too dark to continue ironing, though there is more than half a basket left of dampened clothes. It really looks stormy. The clouds have been racing past overhead, and the wind is blowing strong. I'm on the front porch, and I've decided I'd better go in the house to write. Somewhere your letter got mislaid, typical of this, so I'll just have to do the best I can. Ed and I stopped at Crawfordsville on the way to Fort Madison to see one of the Parsons girls we know. We got some of the Parsons College gossip and killed some time. We didn't drive very fast, but took our time and got to Fort Madison at about 5 o'clock. Mrs. Dougherty and Alice and one of Alice's girlfriends were the only ones there until Ed and I and Albert and Joan went to get Mr. Dougherty at the railroad station. We went back to supper, and for a Sunday night supper, it was huge, but after I think it over, I guess it's because Mr. Dougherty does not come home for lunch at all. Steak, mashed potatoes, gravy, beans, slaw, and ice cream. On the way into Fort Madison before we got to Ed's, we stopped to ask Paul Morgan, one of those Iowa U blokes, and what a terrific blow he is, if he'd like to double date with us. And wouldn't you know, kid, ask one of Ed's old girlfriends and Marjorie Kelly. We were going to go see Bob Hope in Caught in the Draft. But Marge is a member of the Latter-day Saints, and she could not leave until after church, and it was then too late to make the second show. So we went to Keokuk and crossed the river to go to Nauvoo, Illinois, the early Mormon settlement, and went up the river and crossed over at Fort Madison. I was getting quite a headache, so we went home quite early. Mom and Marge and I had quite a discussion on. That Marge Kelly was such a chatterer, how I should write, little or big. Oh, hell, that she alone was enough to give me a headache. I slept in Ed's bed, a half or three-quarter size, and he slept on a cot. I asked them to get me up at 7, so I'd be up when Ed went to work, and then I'd start home early Monday morning. But Ed warned the folks to be very quiet, so I wouldn't wake up until after he'd gone to work, and then I'd have to stay until noon to see him, and at noon he talked me into meeting him at Schaefer's at 5 o'clock to go golfing. But I had about 4 hours to kill between times, so I took Alice the Goonchild and a little friend of hers to a show. We saw Ray Midland and Lupe Valles in Untamed, and Cary Grant and Irene Dunn in My Favorite Wife. We saw it in Cedar Rapids, but I enjoyed it very much anyway. We got out at about 5 and went right away to Schaefer's to get Ed. It was very cloudy, and so we decided not to go play golf. I was going to start home, but Mrs. Dougherty said I could not leave with it so stormy, and that I had to stay overnight. So Ed and I went to the show and saw Caught in the Draft. It was good, and we both laughed and laughed. I stayed all night again, but overslept and had to wait until noon to leave, and after seeing Ed at noon, I fiddled around for a while and then came home, stopping in Fairfield to leave your watch at Mr. Lean's to have it fixed. He looked it over and said the dowel staff or bow spring, one of the two was bent, and that he thought a jewel was loose on top of it being dirty and needing regulating. I'm not just sure how long it will take. He wasn't either, but promised to drop me a card and let me know. It will cost about $3.50 to fix it. While I was there, I bought Chris a baby ring, just identical to M.A.'s, only it is a 24-karat gold, while M.A.'s is a 10-karat. The design is like it even. I was surprised to find them so near alike, but I was sort of pleased. It was given in our names, as was M.A.'s. We're even on that score at least. Ed may come up again this weekend, and then again he may not. It's mail time. I should hear from him this morning. Write again soon. Love, Sweetie. Christopher has the colic, and we are spoiling him. Bill hopes to come after us July 18th, which is 8 days away. He is hunting for a furnished house. We are sewing, so may not write so good now. We have canned 34 quarts of beans to date, and that is about all for the present. Margie and Mort sent CR a chenille bedspread with a big teddy bear in the middle. Love, Sister. Yeah,
So that was an additional note that was at the end.
from her other sister, because Jean is the recipient of the vast majority of this collection of letters, and they're absolutely the closest sisters. I'm a twin. I'm a very bad twin. We're not. I don't. I think it's fair to say from both perspectives, but especially from mine, worst twin sisters ever.
Oh, Allison.
We're gonna work on that. I promise. So if people are like, "Wow, that's really sad to hear," we're gonna work on that. But as far as sisters go, who are not twins, Jean and Sweetie Catherine, they're about 2 years apart, and they're extremely, extremely close. Margaret is the eldest sibling of the family, and Margaret, so she is known as Sister. So when you see, or when you hear in the letters someone referred to as Sister, that's the eldest sibling here. Also, a couple notes in here. Some of the names are abbreviated, and that's intentional. Sometimes they're abbreviated just because they were abbreviated in the letters. Sometimes they're abbreviated because it means that this individual may still be living. So just with regards to privacy, right? We're going through family letters. If a full name's given, these are individuals from the previous generation, that it being 2024 now, 80 years later, they're no longer with us. So they've been left intact for the flow of the letters from Sweetie's perspective. But if there's an individual that I'm just going to say may still be living, they've been intentionally abbreviated just for a little bit of privacy there with the family. Even though most of the time that she's talking about people, it's when people were like 3 years old, 2 years old. She's hanging out with children. She's walking around. She's an 18-year-old. What is the natural thing for 18-year-olds to be doing whenever a parent's away? Oh, well, you're going to babysit over here. I need to watch the kids. So we do a lot about, her being put in charge of other people to help out with the family things. Now, one of the things that, I'll turn around real quick here, that Jamie and I have is we can go back to a couple of these letters a little easier.
Well, too, I just wanted to touch on this real quick because I want to clarify like what happened here. So Allison, you had told me that, back in the day like this, they would send a letter and then that person would then forward the letter to another family member.
They would do that a lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, you can understand like if you get a letter, that sister would then add a little note to it and then send that forward. So that's really cool. And I think that's a beautiful idea. Like, it's so cool. You could just take the letter, send it to another family member so that they can see everything too. And that's how we get everything. Too. And I also love that she's like going to all these old movies. Like, I want to watch these.
Absolutely.
And too, like this, again, she's like, so culturally, let's clarify Ed. So Ed is her boyfriend at the time.
Yep.
This is a definite thing. And she's at his house. And she stays the night there, with not only with parental knowledge, but with parental insistence. Yeah. So again, just another thing that's different. In with our generations.
And just one note of humor here, because at the beginning of the letter she says this, and I'm always laughing. If there's one thing about you're gonna learn about Sweetie, is she hates chores, and I think everybody does too. And she's not moving quickly through them. When she's saying that she started about 6:30 in the morning and she's been up ironing and she still has half of the clothes to get through, it's like 3 hours later. I don't think there was too much focus on the ironing for 3 hours.
Well, I certainly hope not.
There's a lot of delayed chores and procrastination that is going to be kind of apparent at times. I also love, and I'm sorry if anybody's hungry, she gives really good descriptions of food.
Yeah, I was hungry. I was like, oh, damn. Yeah.
And then the other thing I wanted to show this is not only were the letters surviving, and again, here's the more typical sort of pacing, and it's just the ability to keep. There's no like erased lines here. The ability to keep like such straight across the page handwriting is really great. But we also have the envelope saved from a vast majority of the letters. So you're going to see on the screen, the envelope is stamped. I'm going to see if the computer will show this. We have these like old stamps. This is the postmark back from them. So sometimes when a letter is not dated, as this letter was not specifically dated, most are, but this one's not. This was from the Thursday Time. We can tell when the letter's from because the envelope has survived from where it was being sent to Jean. And we get, that idea of when it's from. Otherwise, in future letters, only the context of the letter can really give away when it's from. But Jean kept everything. Again, Jean's the hero of the whole tale, and she's mostly sad.
Yes. Thank you, Jean.
Thank you, Aunt Jean. Aunt Jean intimidated me when I was a kid. I will say this, not because she was like really mean or anything, but she had such a presence. Like when you're meeting people in life and you're like, that person's like on their, I don't want to interrupt this. They're very set in what they do. And she intimidated me in the sense that she had this really, really big personality, but I was a kid. And when I knew her, she was in her 70s. And there was really no way to relate. But now all I can think is, I wish I could have talked to Aunt Jean more before she had passed. And she is actually the last sibling to pass. She dies after Sweetie, and hence we get the letters, but that's more in the episode 0. Yeah. So we hear about Ed. We hear about Dougherty. We hear about the storms. We hear about the movies. We hear a little language that isn't today's language for sure, but it's from then. And then we get into sort of more of the driving. Now, one of the things mentioned is they cross over into Illinois. So I think it's important to note that when they're out in Ottumwa, they're in the eastern part of Iowa, which all of the eastern border of Iowa is the Mississippi River. So Illinois is on the other side. And so they can go visit some various sites. And she goes out and she does a lot of things. They talk about golfing, little things that they're just doing day to day. It's the summertime. So they're out traveling, they're out seeing sights. And I think we should start up the next letter. In the next letter, we're going to hear a little more about Ed. As we start to hear from, we start to hear about all of the boys and the boyfriend items that are going to come up here. So we'll go ahead and start playing this one. Monday, 9:15 p.m. Dear Jean, it's too darn hot to sleep or anything else. I broke my glasses, and while they're in the process of being re-cemented, I might just as well strain my eyes this way as reading. Besides, Sister cabbaged onto my book, The Exile, Pearl S. Buck. I borrowed it of Janet Frigg. I took the Chevy to Fairfield today to get your watch that cost $3.50. He refused to, down as much as I tried to. It shall be sent to you insured. Right now, I forgot to take it out of the car, but it's perfectly safe since all the windows of the car are rolled up. The car stands locked in the garage, and the garage is padlocked. Oh yes, it's in the closed glove compartment. It'll be okay. Yeah, we can pause
that. That's hilarious, first of all, because it's her sister, and she's like, I just want to let you know, right? It's in the car, and it's locked, and it's in the garage. So yeah, okay.
One other thing we should bring up before we go on, because it was mentioned the $3.50. Yeah. So inflation of years,
right?
Completely changed.
So how much would that be in today's dollars?
So I know, what is it about? It's a certain multiple from like even the 60s. So minimum, there's no way it's anything less than $30 today. Like at a times 10, and I think it's probably far more than that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So today, fixing your watch would not cost $3.50. Yeah,
certainly not.
But we'll note that, because there's going to be, I think, the dollar amounts every now and then they kind of are a shock to our system when we hear it. Like, wait, what? How much was that? Yeah, not getting a watch for $3.50 these days. But we'll continue with the story here.
Yes.
Ed came up Friday night of this weekend and didn't leave home until about 7 or 7:30. And when he got about 4 or 5 miles out of Mount Pleasant, his darn Ford broke down on him. It cost him $7.50 to have the distributor fixed, and he didn't get here till 10 o'clock. Myra had taken Emma to Pleasant Plain to her mother's house, and they'd been out way late. I was just putting Emma to bed and trying to decide whether to go myself or wait. He came just in time. He was feeling pretty bad because he isn't going to get to go to school until the school semester, unless he can get a full board job. In such an event, he could go the first semester too. His dad's health is failing. I don't know what is the matter with him, but he isn't very well. As long as Ed wants to go to school, his dad will not give in to a little rest. He works hard to make the needed money for Ed's education. So our noble Ed Says as long as he has the job at Schaefer's, he'll just keep on working until he can go to school without being such a drain on his dad's pocketbook. And that's okay too, but we're going to miss a lot of fun at the early parties. He's sergeant at arms of the Zeta Frat, and he will have to give that up. He's worried about getting into the Philharmony chair at the semester period, and most of all, he doesn't like the job he has to stay out of school to keep. Saturday afternoon, we went to Fairfield, and Ed borrowed some golf clubs of one of his frat brothers, and we went to Walton Lake to go golfing. You know, I've never played golf in my life, and the manner in which I swing at that poor little ball, notice swung at and not hit, gave me a severe Charlie horse in my arms and shoulders. Ed's a pretty fair golfer, and though I couldn't play worth a whoop, I got bit by the golf bug, and I'm sure going to learn how. I'm going to ask Bill to bring down his golf clubs. They're talking about going to Branson tomorrow. I don't know what for nor for how long. They may not even go. Ed came out to supper Saturday after he'd stopped at the Zeta house to take a shower and put on clean clothes. By the way, he sure did look nice in dark brown trousers, white shirt, brown sweater, and brown and white shoes. I cleaned up, washed, and put on my sharkskin suit, and we went to Ottumwa to see Clark Gable and Rosalind Russell. They met in Bombay. It was good. I liked it. Sunday, I got up, dressed in my new seersucker suit, and took M.A. in her seersucker. Red and white stripes, her dress and my suit are quite similar to Sunday school, and I stayed for church and sang in the choir. Sunday before last, I sang a solo with the choir chiming in on the chorus. Ed came Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock, and we went to the Waterworks Park to sit and gossip about this and that and what all are going to do next year. Then at 4:30, we went to the co-ed to see Tyrone Power, Linda Darnell, Rita Hayworth in Blood and Sand. It was a lot of bullfighting in Spain, and I didn't like it so very well. I'd sure like to see Bette Davis in The Great Lie that is now on at the Rex in Fairfield, but I haven't the money. Ed stayed until 10 o'clock Sunday night and then left to go home. He and his sister are going to Missouri next week to see his grandfather, who's quite old and not expected to live very long. But he will come up here the next weekend, I think. He invited me to come to his house the last 4 days of August and the first 2 days of September to a big celebration, but Mom says we'll probably be in the process of moving, and that I probably couldn't go. Well, anyway, buying Mrs. Dougherty a pair of $1.48 nylon hose for a thank you gift is a little too much anyway. I'd sure like to come and stay a weekend with you as soon as possible. Some weekend when I know Ed isn't coming up here, sometime when Hilma will be there. About the only rub to that would be leaving Mama alone. She doesn't like it, and it gives me a sort of guilty feeling. I hate Richland. There's nothing to do here. People don't like me. Did I tell you about the time I went uptown, M.A. with me, and was greeted by some dope yelling, "There comes that cute little Demery girl and her stuck-up aunt." I didn't even know who the darn bloke was, and I didn't care to look at him. Janet Frigg is about the only one who is my age and treats me anyways near decent. Marion's too busy blowing about her summer school. I took Janet and her 2 younger sisters to Fairfield with me today. We went into Parsons, and I paid a $5 deposit on my room, the same one I had, with a proviso that it would be refunded if I notified them of my change of plans before 10 days before school was to begin. I took Janet through Ballard Hall, and she was quite surprised to find out just how nice it really is. It was fun to show her around because the poor kid hasn't been around very much, and she was quite appreciative of the things I showed her. Did Hilma ever say that her mother had gotten a letter from me? I want you to write and tell me when Dr. O'Brien gets back from his vacation. I'm getting darn tired of trying to keep these glasses cemented. I got a letter today from Joellen Kilpatrick out at Chalet Ranch in Yellowstone National Park. She's really having it nice. She works as a maid making beds, etc., at a ranch hotel. She's going back to Parsons to school, too. Bernadine left yesterday afternoon, Sunday at 3:40 for Oskaloosa, where she enrolled in Murphy's Business School. It's the same place Bernice Davis goes. She got a job in a private home, working for her board and room. She's not going to give Steve up entirely, I don't believe, but she's sort of looking for a new field in which to try her technique. Bernice tells tales of plenty of men, and I'm sure you know the effect that would have on Bernadine, don't you? She borrowed the $80 it took to enroll. Ed bets she'll hook some sucker who will have to pay off the note for her. Ruth, too, is contemplating a business course. Her plans for next year at Parsons are not materializing. While Mary Betty broke her contract to teach a Rubio country school so she might make her promises to a Mr. Clive Clark of Brighton, owner of a snappy convertible and a big grocery store. They'll be married sometime this fall. Margaret is going to teach at Yarmouth, over close to Mount Pleasant. I think she's jealous of Mary, and will try to snatch a man as soon as she can. Well, I've written you. Now it's your turn. As Uncle Merrill signs his letter, your bro, I'll sign mine. Love, your sis. We got a short note from Bob saying he'd gotten there okay. Yeah, and this is... Yeah.
I love that one.
How fun. Oh my God.
I mean, look at how long it is.
Yeah.
First of all, let's talk about how
Patience
long
to
it
write
is.
this all out.
Let's break this one down. So, like the very first thing that she says that she wrote, besides, sister cabbaged onto my book.
I don't know about anybody who's listening, but we need to find a way to use the word cabbaged in a sentence. You know?
Now I have written here, and I think you might have told me this. Cabbaged means very drunk.
I'm not too sure. We'll have to. You know what? I'll have to look it up. So now we
No,
have to look it up, right? We have to.
Nah, let's look it up.
Let's see. To cabbaged something. Steal or to filch. That's it. It's
to steal.
Yeah,
okay.
There we go.
Yeah, I have a question mark there, so I didn't want to say that, but yeah. But I said, and I had to stop you because it just cracks me up how she's like, it's in the car. It's locked up. There's a padlock. It's fine. Because as a sister, and I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest. I have a brother and 2 sisters. And as a sister, I'd be like, yeah, that's exactly how it is. So, but that was something I really appreciated. And then, so it cost Ed $7.50 to fix his car. I bet he was so mad about that.
And we can kind of get an idea of how much things cost at the time. The watch fix, right? It was $3.50. Mm-hmm. The car being fixed was $7.50, which really makes me think something was really wrong with the watch. In the grand scheme of things. And the deposit for the room was $5 for the board, room and board. Can you imagine?
Oh, and it wasn't at $80. They said it was $80.
I think the semester of the friend. Yeah,
to enroll at Parsons for the
she's
semester.
Gonna get the boyfriend to pay for. That's the plan. He's not paying for that. There's gonna be some cabbaging going on with the money. Yeah.
We have to get cabbaged we'll have to. We're bringing back cabbaged.
Just for the libertarians who are listening, taxation is cabbaging. I don't know. We have to find how cabbage works in that phrase, but they all know.
We'll do it. We'll get there. We'll find something. But she goes to a ton of movies.
Yeah.
And I love too. We're touching on the fashion. We're touching on what they're wearing. So when we talk about how she's very, descriptive, she covers all this stuff. And I definitely want to get more into the different clothes that they're wearing and the different styles that they I think we need to get into that
Clark
more.
Gable. Okay, so put this in sort of the movie history. Now, I worked at Blockbuster years and years ago. R.I.P. Blockbuster. I think maybe there's one store still out there, but as far as Blockbuster is concerned, it's a thing of the past. Part of history as well.
Yeah.
Clark Gable, right? Really, really well known at that time period. Major, major actor. 1939 is going to be arguably the biggest film of all time with Gone with the Wind. It's going to come up in the future. But when the moment I saw his name, I'm like, Gone with the Wind. So to put that into sort of the film history, because I'm sure there are some people that really appreciate the history of film, late 30s, 39 was a huge, huge year for film. Gone with the Wind is one. The Wizard of Oz is another, if I recall correctly. And I believe the third is Snow White. So you can imagine, we're hitting all these, great, right at the end of the 1930s. And this is really going to be where, Disney coming in, color picture coming in. That's not to say that all the movies that they're watching are in color. Gone with the Wind was quite special. So was The Wizard of Oz with this. But when I see the name Clark Gable, it makes me think immediately back to now we're in sort of more of the transformation of cinema. And they're witnessing that, and they're going to these shows, and they're seeing double features like all the time. No.
Yeah, I would love for her. I hope
Mhm.
she like talks about the
Mhm.
price of
Admission.
movies. Like that's really amazing to me. Like I wonder how much. And she often like is hanging
Right.
out with other people, you know, and hangs out with a ton of friends all the time. Oh, and I just love to so oh man, Allison, I didn't even I need to talk about this, but I'm not a historian. I actually got my college degree
Mhm.
in biology. So I have a biology degree in environmental health sciences, which my specialization was in industrial hygiene and environmental protection, which I don't use at all. I'm a stay-at-home mom. So it's kind of funny to me because like this is just all really cool stuff, but I see things pop out in Yellowstone
Right.
National Park. Like she had friends working at
Yep.
Yellowstone National Park. Can you imagine back in the 30s or back in the 40s, being out there and then having to come back for school? But it's just like, you know what? That's
Right.
what summer kids
Yeah.
did. They went out and worked and got summer jobs. This is actually, it's really funny because my stepfather, he was out there and he worked out
Okay.
in the park system out west. Like when he was in his 20s, that's what you do. You go out west and you work. And he was born in 55, so it was
Right.
the 70s. But it's really cool to see like that kind of like, you know,
Yeah.
remind us of that, you know, because our national parks,
Mhm.
as you know, for me,
Yep.
are an absolute treasure and probably one of the only good things the government has ever
Department of the
done.
Interior runs the National Park Service. That's where I like to vacation so much, as the national parks. Now, I see a lot of the historical parks in addition to the natural wonders. And America, just
Yes.
talking about the amount of natural wonders we have in this country compared to so many other countries. And the amount of work, it's not just the people that work for the Park Service, it's all of the volunteers of the Park Service. Every time I've gone to a location
Yes.
run and operated by the Park Service and staffed a lot, not just by the staff of the Park Service, but by the volunteers of the Park Service, it's always been the best experience. And almost all of it has been
Mhm.
either free or almost nothing. Usually it's something like you pay for the drive to get up to a certain location because you have to. It's like $5 or something, like the pass on the road into
Well,
like the drive.
ugh.
Very minimal.
And I do, but like this actually is something I would love to bring up because my family travels to the Great Smoky Mountains
Yep.
National Park every year. We actually have a
Okay.
vacation home there. And this past year, they started, you
The
have to have
entrance
a parking
fees, yeah, and the
pass.
parking.
Yeah, there, and it's never
Mhm.
been like that before. And so, yeah, again, like I really do like bringing
Yeah,
these different
for
changes
sure.
to light.
And then the other thing is we were talking about people working. Ed is working to try to pay off his tuition. His father's in ailing health. And that
Mhm.
whole sort of part where she stops for a moment and talks more about Ed. That he's trying to cover that board, that he's trying to be, you know, the good son that isn't the drain, so that he can support himself and support his family.
Well, she
Yeah,
called him
the
noble.
noble.
So that, yeah,
Mhm.
that's where she was
She's still
with
a little
him.
sad
Mhm.
about maybe
Yeah.
not getting to the parties, but I mean, she understands 100%. There's a priority here and there's a focus here, and everybody's working. You know, so the friend
Mhm.
that's over in Yellowstone is working over the summer. That's
Mhm. Everybody's like going out and and again too, like, when she talks about Ed, I think that with the letter, when you're writing
Mhm.
letters like this, journaling is something that, you know, is actually, people are like, if you want to improve your life, journal. You know, it's something that, and when she's writing these
Yeah.
letters and you know, you go back
Mhm.
and you read, like you're reading your letter or you're like writing it out, it gives you a chance to ponder and be reflective.
Mhm.
And I like this. I think that that's probably something that we are missing a lot of, is that we are
Oh my
so
gosh.
fast. We're not taking the time to consider like our actions and stuff. And like when she's writing it down, she's just like, it also kind of like helps her understand and like maybe see where she's at. And also, like you said, oh, I'm going to miss parties, but
Yeah.
in the long run,
He's doing
he's
the
a
right
good man. You know, he's doing the
Yeah.
right thing. Yeah. And we've gotten
And then
away
we get
from
to
that.
that ending of the letter, which to me sounds like, I remember when I was in pit orchestra, I was playing Bye Bye Birdie, which the whole number, I don't know if you're familiar with Bye Bye Birdie, but in the show Bye Bye Birdie, it starts with everybody talking. It's set in high school, but it's everybody talking about who's going steady with whom. And that's the focus of everything. And all of a sudden, at the end of the letter, in a dense little section there in about 2 paragraphs, here are all these people, and here are all their plans. They're all looking for husbands, basically. And we have to go take care of this, basically. She's 18. And the question's going to be, and of course, a couple of us know the answer here, but if she's already writing about this, she's thinking the same thing too. Like, is she going to stay with Ed? We're going to leave that to future letters and things like that. But obviously, there's a big idea of, I'm going to start my family. I'm going to get married to this person. I'm going to go over here. This guy has a convertible. And here comes...
and a grocery store.
Yeah. Sweetie is very focused on this. And then she gives the frank commentary, which is the most magical part of her letters. It's incredibly snarky. She's writing 100%. Like, these are her friends. And she's telling Jean, well, here's what's really going on. Like, this is the one person that's really nice to me. But then all these other people, you know, so on and so forth. And here's what they're up to, too. So we get to see sort of that life and just how things are going. And it's just, to me, listening back 80 years ago to the focus and these little moments where she just kind of gets into a rant. They're fantastic rants on a variety of subjects. And I think we're just going to have so much fun with her as she explains, you know, what's going on back in her time period, 1941. So after this letter, in our next episode, we're going to be continuing on forward in time. You know, we're not going to be rewinding at any point here. We're just going to keep journeying with Catherine, with Sweetie, through her life. And we're going to see where things go. Certainly, it's 1941. It's a major year for history. That's going to be, I think, looming in the background, what's going to be coming up. But we'll get there when we get there. And I know this episode is going to be longer than some of our early episodes, but it's because it's the first one. We needed to do a lot of introductions. But again, Jamie, thank you so much for joining me on this journey and going through these stories with my grandmother. It really brings her back to life. It's interesting that every time I work with her letters, I feel she's in the room with me, you know, that she's back. And then there's like a time work, you know, she's going to vanish again. But her presence is really, really here, and the energy is here. And I can't say exactly, we will never know what she would have thought about people going through her letters and it being given to the world. You know, her to the world. This is the representation of women in the 1940s at that age range and these observations. But I think she would have had a grin on her face. I do think there would have been some sort of snarky grin on her face. So
I think at the end of all this, I think we'll be pretty certain that she does.
Yeah. So I guess we'll leave it with that. We hope everybody catches the next episode as we continue on with Sweetie's journey. And we'll stop here.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Love Sweetie podcast. For more information on Sweetie and her life, as well as more information on this podcast, please go to www.lovesweetiepodcast.com. Again, that's www.lovesweetiepodcast.com.